It used to be called LSIG, Engineering Leadership Special Interest Group, but people kept pronouncing it LSIG. So we said no. And before that, it was Silicon Valley, SE Forums, I don't know, whatever. So all these years we kept it going because people who are technology background find out eventually as they start to lead a team and manage a business or a project that they need human skills. So managers are not the same as leaders, and a group of people is not the same as a real team. And what you need today to get something done, one person can't do it. The huge kind of instruments that John and his team work on, they have like 950 engineering kind of people reporting into somewhere around involved with his organization. Huge teams are required to get things done. Even in academia, papers are authored by multiple people. So anybody, even hardcore technologists, have to have human skills, what my friends call the touchy-feely crap. So we are here to help people in engineering and technology acquire those skills. Communication, leadership, team effectiveness, that sort of thing. And also to help networking. Who here has the same job for their whole life? Same company, same job? Exactly. We strongly believe that the relationships last longer than the jobs. The relationships in Silicon Valley last longer than some companies. So you can't afford to let your network lapse. So we're a forum where you can stay connected. You'll always have a home base here, no matter what job or company you're working with. So we provided a lot of support for people in career transitions. That being said, at the end of the night, we'll ask who's looking for a job, who has a job. But please do network with each other and make connections. Do a follow-up. Have a lunch. Go on a walk and talk. You know, this is building community that's going to last longer than your next job assignment. Especially the manager level, the leader level. We're the first ones cut, right? Whenever things get tight. We love to keep the coders. I don't know why. So the last thing is that Silicon Valley Engineering Leadership Community is free. The food is sponsored by one of our sponsors. This time it's Contenio. Contenio. Is someone here from Contenio? Otherwise, I'll have to read their type sheet. Okay. So they pitch in $200 and they get mentioned on the website, and they also get some time here. So let me just mention them. Contenio. We believe that collaborating teams are the most powerful force. We have to solve the world's most challenging problems. Everything we do is all about making teams more successful by giving them the frameworks they need to succeed. We are inspired by serious games and game mechanics and cognitive science and organizational behavior. So they do a lot of things through gamification to help people learn to work together. They have partnerships with Heteren Foundation and Every Voice Engaged. So they've been very active. I think that's Luke Cohen's group, right?
Luke.
CONTENEO.co. So they've been around forever under various names. Okay, next. I know Liesel's going to talk first. I just wanted to just mention that John has been sponsoring this space. John and Varian Medical have been sponsoring this space for years. So he drags the cooler full of aging beer down from his office. He drags the cart. And this is a guy with a Master of Science in
medical physics.
Medical physics and a PhD in
bioengineering.
And he's dragging our snacks out here. Okay, so this is my kind of guy. And he's going to tell you about some of his challenges. I meet a lot of engineers. They're working on software, but he's working on hardware, software, firmware, systems, high voltage, danger, FDA approved, GLP, GMP, blah, blah, blah. Many things you don't even know what these sentences mean, right? Try to apply Agile and Scrum in those environments. It's much more challenging than just rolling out the next version of code that's for a purely software business. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what you have to say. And now we're going to introduce Liesel because you're giving 10 minutes to her.
Right.
Okay.
For those who don't have loud voices, we have a microphone. And indeed, Liesel Mendoza is going to be talking about the mechanism which she spoke to me about it about 3-4 weeks ago, and it sounds like for those of you who have life experiences and are looking for ways to help others out, Liesl has an interesting option for you.
Thank you. So while John is doing that, thank you so much, John and Kimberly and the Silicon Valley engineering leadership community for letting me spread the word about the mentoring club tonight. So let me start by taking you back to the year 1998. Ready? So, imagine a Filipina working in high-tech in her early 30s, visiting San Francisco for the first time. And her friend takes her to the city on one sunny summer morning. They parked at the rooftop of a building garage along Market Street. And as soon as she sees the horizon, blue skies, buildings, she felt in her gut, this is my next career challenge. I will work here. Fast forward year 2000. Imagine the same person combing Silicon Valley, methodically networking, telling people of her experience and her goal to work in the Bay Area, and asking them for feedback. So that person was me. That year, I met over 200 or close to 200 people just networking. That was how I met the owners of J-Way. And I didn't get a job during that networking stint, but I kept connected with the people that I met. And fast forward again, 2002. I was working at Sun Microsystems in the Philippines, and the managing director of J-Way called me and said, "We're ready for you. Come and join us." So I became J-Way's business development manager in 2002. And after being with J-Way for 8 years, I was recognized for my contributions to the company and made partner and COO. So another fast forward, 2013. I had another compulsion in my gut. And that was, I want to be able to give back when I turn 50. I had to search what that give back might be. And in February of 2016, I registered the Mentoring Club as a nonprofit organization. So that gives you a flavor of who I am, the glimpse of who I am. So why am I here tonight? So I'm here tonight to ask your help and support for the key focus initiatives that I have for the Mentoring Club. So number 1 is mentor recruitment, number 2 is mentee adoption, and number 3 is fundraising through donations or grants if you have connections to foundations. But before you support me, you need to know what I stand for and what the Mentoring Club stands for. So, John? Okay, so this is my vision. My vision is that at the heart of the Mentoring Club are the young professionals. They're passionate, they're talented, information right at their fingertips, but what they lack is the experience that only years in the field can give. And that's where the community of mentors come in. So they are leaders, they have high self-esteem, they are happy and successful in their own terms, not other people's standards, and they are ready to give back. So we are building the interconnections of mentors and mentees in this way by looking at specific skills that the mentees need to develop in themselves. So as you can see here, it could be different areas that you're mentoring or being mentored on, and the organization allows for relationships on a many-to-many scenario. So, and this is the definition that we go by as far as mentoring is concerned. Margot Murray is my mentor for the mentoring club. And she has over 40 years of experience in developing mentoring programs and conducting emotional intelligence conferences. And she's graciously guided me through setting up the mentoring club. And the key thing to note here is that when we talk about mentoring, it's not just one meeting. It's a deliberate pairing where you have a mutually agreed goal of developing your mentee in specific competencies so that that mentee can grow and develop the skill. So how are we going to do this on a global scale? It's platform approach. So that's how we can connect people using a platform which we built using Salesforce because it's a very robust environment that leverages the connections and communities and building relationships. So where have we been as far as, just so you know how we've been doing the work. So in 2016, we established the Mentoring Club as a nonprofit. 2017, we became tax exempt. We also conducted pilot trial mentor-mentee relationships. And then 2018 was when we built the platform and launched it. 2019 is when we observed how people interact, use, and improve upon it. And we started fundraising as well. I've been funding it myself. And then next year, we're hoping that we would be able to offer the platform as an enterprise solution, and we can get revenue out of subscriptions. We will still do fundraising that year, and then the following year, hopefully we don't have to because we can achieve sustainability through the subscription model for both the mentee and the enterprises. So the last piece that I would like to share with you are the leadership core values that I myself believe in. So the first three, integrity, honesty, and commitment, I think are the values that we hold to become trustworthy individuals. Vision and execution are traits that we need to become leaders. Vision without execution and the other way around leads to nothing. And then the last three, humanity, contentment, and family, I believe are the grounding forces that I have in my life that make me happy. So, and just to go back to why I'm here, I am asking for help around, if you know mentees, then please refer them to me. If you yourselves would like to become mentors, please come talk to me. And then if you have any connections at all in the fundraising world, please let me know too. So thank you so much.
Thank you. 10 minutes on the nose. I myself have just signed up, so I'll find out soon just what the consequences of that might be.
We'll expect you to report on it.
All right. So I'm going to talk to you about safety-critical applications and what it means to be an engineering leader in this environment. And I'm going to start off with an agenda. Who am I? What is the safety-critical issue, and what is the challenge to engineering leadership? For some of you, you might know about medical devices. Aaron specifically knows a lot. but some of you don't, and have to give some context so you understand the framework, which is a good example of SafetyCritical. And then we're going to go on to what does an engineer manager do in this environment? What do you do? And I'll try and summarize. Okay, so just a little bit about me and who the heck I am. Thanks to Kimberly for the introduction. So what you see is I started off with 10 years in what I call a mid-sized medical device firm prior to the introduction of the FDA quality system regulations. Those are the Wild West days. Then I spent 9 years in the non-regulated world of wireless telemetry security inspection. I got a lot of standard engineering experience here and management experience and project management in a non-regulated environment. Then I came back to medical world, and I've now been here in Varian almost 15 years. And I'm going to call Varian a big-sized medical device firm. I'm going to talk a bit more in the future about what mid and big means and what the implications of that are. And constantly evolving regulatory landscape. And Aaron can probably fill you in a lot about all of that. Okay, so let's talk about the challenge. The truth is, the world is a dynamic place, and companies have to meet changing markets all the time, changing expectations all the time. And companies try to get passion in their staff in order to design for this. This phrase, run around and break things, that is the term used at Facebook. Stanford professor Robert Sutton wrote about this. This attitude, get out there, innovate, create, and be passionate. This business of run around and break things, its psychological foundation is neurological studies have shown that adults, teens, kids, and even infants, all of us have an intrinsic desire to control our environment. If we don't have any options, if we cannot evict chains, if there's no way for us to start a change, we get depressed, we get demoralized. It happens across the board. So if you give employees freedom to change, freedom to whatever, you can get more excitement, more passion out of it. And that's what Facebook was trying to do with their run around and break things thing. In the press, we read a lot about fake it till you make it. One of the cases here in San Francisco that, well, the company has survived. It may have done, maybe on the edge of the legal world for a while, but going back some 15, 16 years ago to the world when the internet was brand new and some new business models were coming out, there's a firm that started to do online mortgages. And what the founders did is they got friends and families to take loans, 40,000 here, 60,000 there, and 50,000 here, and so on. And they take a loan for 4 or 5 months and then repay it. And what happened is this created artificial churn, made the numbers look good. They looked good to the SEC, who didn't know they were friends and family. And they built up the numbers so that eventually they became a real online mortgage company because people saw this amount of money flowing through, saw that loans were repaid, saw things were being done, and that's how they faked it until they made it. Also here in Silicon Valley, keep pivoting until you stumble into the winning formula. What that refers to is a lot of startups, they start with what they think is a business plan, but everyone knows that you're going to have to adapt. And what you think, you kind of imagine that your market is such and such, but as you work your way into it, you will discover nuances that will cause you to change plans. And if you are successful, that version of the company which is successful differs in a variety of ways from what the original business plan was. That's all the pivoting and changing. This is the environment that we're in. That's how a lot of other companies deal with evolving markets, evolving expectations, and so on. Like it says here, engineering creativity encourages passion, and when designers are passionate, that means products that delight the customer. Okay, that's the background. Well, what the heck happens when you're dealing with safety-critical devices? You're building a nuclear power plant, a submarine, an aircraft, and you want to say Boeing 737 MAX. Medical devices. Do you want to run around and break these on medical devices?
Seems to be what companies do.
Well, I've described why they do it. They try to delight the customer, they try to move quickly, but you can't necessarily do that in safety-critical devices. We've had some high-profile failures. I'm going to have to acknowledge Theranos, so technically that wasn't so much an engineering management mistake. For those of you who read the book about it, that blood testing firm, whose headquarters was just 2 blocks from your brother, right? There was active fraud going on there. But it was a case of a company that had a dream and they thought they could fake it until they made it. And the point was, you just don't do that in medical devices. People's lives are at stake. Just today, in my email inbox, was an article about, do lessons from the Boeing 737 MAX apply to medical devices, and so on. I mean, we can try our own armchair quarterbacking about what went on, but chances are everyone in this room just knows a small fragment of what the truth is. And we've all been through software testing and released things to the field and then discovered a bug. And I'm sure it's happened to all of us. Just a few weeks ago, John Oliver, in his weekly show, he went over medical devices in the 510K process, which Varian uses a lot. And he pointed out a bunch of flaws with it. And he was mainly speaking about implants. He talked about the hernia mesh and about the vaginal mesh and a bunch of mistakes there, and there have been plenty of lawsuits there. But even though one is in a safety-critical environment, the companies that made those products didn't do things right. Something slipped through the crack. We know they had economic pressures, everyone does. They know we had a bunch of schedule pressures, everyone does, and yet something still slipped through. Now, there's been some press on Tesla autopilot crashes. I admit I do not know all the regulations in the automotive industry. I know there are some. I also know they don't think they have quite the same design control rules that medical devices follow. Now, Tesla's counterpoint to these crashes are that if you look at the statistics of all the drivers and all the driving miles, you'll find that people who have autopilot engaged have fewer accidents. Yes, there are still some accidents, but not as many as you otherwise would have. So I'm going to call this the being less worse scenario. And it's an intriguing defense. We'll see how it stands up in the various lawsuits which come through. We're not yet at the point where privacy is regulated, but there have been enough mistakes and Facebook has had to say oops enough times that I think many of us can see that privacy and regulations around it are going to come down the pipe. There was a time that privacy was not considered safety, but it's a form of economic safety in a certain sense. So I'm expecting to see it happen. Okay, so with this background, acknowledging that there are mistakes even in regulated industries, and as an engineering leader, what your job, you need to you have to keep a team up and running And here I'm listing a question here. How do you properly set executive expectations on schedules? And I'm now thinking of, I've been in a situation in the past where I've had a recruiter call me up and say, John, we want you to work for us. We're doing this really neat medical device. Our board of directors say they want the first version out in 9 months and they want the 510K applied in 12 months. Okay, after he describes the situation to me, I'm thinking, back in my experience in wireless and my experience in non-regulated worlds, I would know how to do that. I do not know how to do that in a compliant manner. And I'm thinking, whoever gets this job, because it's not going to be me, is going to have an interesting task in front of them. How do you manage executive expectations? Whoever is on the board of directors there doesn't know the field well and doesn't know what's involved. I was once apprised of one tactic. I have to admit, I have not had to use this yet. I'm keeping it in my back pocket. And it pertains to the parable of the man on death row who promised the king that he'd teach a horse to talk. This is going back a parable, 1,500, 2,000 years ago, and the king's about to send him to death, and he says, I'll teach your horse how to talk. Give me a year, and I'll teach your horse how to talk. And the king stares at him and says, okay, you got a year. He sends him off to prison, and every day the guy tries to teach the horse to talk. And the guard is talking to him, and he says, you know, you're never going to get this horse to talk. He says, I know that too, but I've got a year. And in those years, in this year, there could be a reorg, or the king could die, or this could happen, or that could happen, anything could happen. And so I'll just keep playing along, and if nothing else, I'll give myself one extra year. This is the parable of the talking horse. So I'm thinking of the executive, whoever gets this job. Maybe he's going to play the same stunt. And he's just going to drag along and pull along, and eventually there's going to be a reorg, and there's going to be a resetting of expectations and whatnot. There's something that you can do. I wouldn't recommend it. I'm just telling you, this is a challenge. This is the reason I spent a few minutes here. This is a challenge. Medical devices you make must be safe. What does safe mean? How safe is safe enough? There was a time in the past the regulations said you had to make your device its safety or its chance of causing harm was ALARP, as low as reasonably possible. This was the old rule. Now, several years ago, they dropped that R. It became as low as possible. They dropped the word reasonably out of there. Now, we have to be unreasonable. And this is a quandary that engineering managers everywhere and leaders as well face. Now, how safe is safe enough? And you're dealing with your own internal team, you're dealing with external expectations. These are questions you have to deal with. Medical device companies get audited. Now, they might get audited because errors had occurred, or they just get audited on every 3 or 4 years, anyhow basis. The point is, you get audited. Now, in some other slides, I'm going to talk about different kinds of audits, but in this particular bullet, I'm referring to an FDA audit, which is a little bit more, okay, in many cases, it's a little bit more antagonistic / oppositional. And the executives of the company will never put an uneducated engineer in front of an FDA auditor, but they will put educated people. And the point is that when you're sitting in the chair in front of the auditor and he or she is asking you questions about, often it appears like you're being asked to prove the obvious, and by that I mean, Aaron, I just saw you rub your nose. Do you have where's your evidence that rubbing the nose solved your problem? Do you have a validation test report for that? You end up with questions, why do you have to prove the obvious? You start to end up having to defend yourself against trivia, and that is, the really smart people try and keep any emotions to themselves, but things leak through. You end up with your executive staff and quite a number of others who've been raked over the coals again and again and again. Things leak into the rest of the company. You end up being excessively cautious. You end up losing some of your passion. This regulated environment, you have a bunch of forms to fill. Every single time you have to fill forms. Back to, I was joking and teasing with Aaron about what is his validation evidence for rubbing his nose. He had to fill in a form for that. Well, where are all the forms and so on? How do you keep your passion up if you're always filling in forms? And creativity and art. Steve Jobs was once known for saying there's a lot of science in art, and there's a lot of art in science. He used the word science, but I'll transpose the word engineering here. The point is, you want to make a product or a service that delights the customer, and if you really have that creativity, the imagination, and the art in there, your chances of delighting the customer are higher. How do you maintain that in a regulated environment? And that's what I call the challenge to engineering leadership. Okay, so that's the challenge. Now more on the context. What does it mean about medical device regulations? Okay, so the comments I'm going to make in this talk tonight are based on a lot of my experience at Varian, which is not the world of pharma, and it is not lab-developed tests. And I point those out because those are under different regulatory environments. Just pointing out LDT, that is what Theranos was under, and there's some wiggle room there, and that's how the lawyers at Theranos thought that they could get through a number of things which they really couldn't. Because at that time, back 5-6 years ago, the FDA gave a lot more wiggle room to LDT. Okay. I'm not going to talk about my experiences in the world of PMA, the pre-market authorization. That is, again, a different regulatory environment. The bar is much higher. I have had a lot of experience in the world of 510K clearance. What that means is you have a predicate device. You basically have an existing medical device and you're doing an upgrade to it. Now, sometimes the upgrade is pretty serious, but it is an upgrade and you're not having to tell the FDA that you have a brand new machine. A lot of my experience is also related to a large medical device firm, and I just want to make a comment on this. You see there in the boat there, greater than 5,000 employees in one business unit. I point that out because overall, up until 2 weeks ago, Varian had 7,000 employees, of which 5,000 were just in one business unit. If you look at the list of medical device firms, Varian is number 27 on the list. There are 26 firms with bigger revenue than Varian. On the other hand, most of those firms, Medtronic, Boston Scientific, Stryker, St. Jude, on and on and on, many of them are collections of acquisitions. So when you read, oh, Boston Scientific has 30,000 employees, that's really 40 acquisitions of 800 people each. And it's kind of a whole bunch of 800 company, 800 person subdivisions, different business units. Some of them are partially joined together. You might have 3 business units all related to spine implants or something, but they are separate. You rarely have 5,000 people in one business unit. So in that perspective, Varian's experience is kind of unique. You don't often have this size environment, even though there are 26 bigger firms. Okay, so that's my experience there. Okay, FDA audits versus ISO 1345. So ISO 1345 was definitely needed in Europe, and if you have your certification, it's harmonized with what the FDA wants, and that'll help you out. The point is, to get your ISO certification, you are employing another company to basically certify you. And they'll do it pretty much on every year or two basis. And so there are a bunch of rules. If you want to get this certification, you got to have a whole bunch of processes. And it tells you what processes to create and whatnot. And the companies that give you the certification, there are several of them. These are called notified bodies, is the name of the type of firm. There's a major German firm, TUV, there's an English firm, BSI, or you probably know some more. But the point is, they make money off of you. They're gonna try and help you pass. If you're not doing well, like, if your firm, dare I say, if your company is basically acting like an asshole, they might not give you the certification on one of the renewals. But by and large, most firms don't deliberately try to be mean and bad. So it's usually a cooperative thing, and it's usually a more pleasant kind of environment. The FDA is not quite the same. Now, FDA audits depend upon the investigator. There are some investigators who like to come in with their holster and gun. It happens. And luckily, it doesn't happen often, but it happens. There have been antagonistic audits. There have been times that a company has been shut down. There have been times, Eric can probably say more about inspectors coming in and taking whole filing cabinets of documents and whatnot. Okay, so I just wanted to point that out because audits do affect the culture of the company. It creeps in, and some are nice and some are not nice. The other aspect of the regulatory environment, it was 22 years ago that the FDA released their QSRs, the quality system regs. It's a little tiny booklet that I forgot to bring with me. And in these QSRs, which belong under the Code of Federal Regulations, CFR 820, there's different sections for different parts of a medical device firm, and 820.30 refers to design control. And there's only like 6 or 7 different sections in there, and they're kind of tiny. And every single one says, you shall have a process for such and such. It's all process related. So what does it mean to regulate? It means to create a process and to follow the process, which, by the way, is kind of interesting. Okay, big firms versus small firms. So back to Varian with its 5,000 employees. I have seen, and I've spoken to people who left Varian and worked at startups, and they say, the startup that I work for now has a bunch of processes that the FDA just cleared, just accepted them. But I know that if we had the same processes at Varian, it would have failed. Because what the FDA does, and this is kind of reasonable in retrospective, is they say, okay, we've got one rule book, the QSRs written 22 years ago, but we're going to audit you at a different level. We're going to set the bar differently. We're not going to set the bar for an established firm, like a certain bar height set for an established firm. We're not going to set the bar at the same point for a startup. A startup just couldn't possibly survive. And that's one rationale, which is kind of fair. Another rationale is, let's say a mistake occurred. At Varian, we have over 8,000 radiation therapy devices around the world. If we made a mistake and released a software bug, it could affect thousands of patients in a really short time. A startup, you make a mistake, you're going to affect a few tens of patients, not thousands. So you can argue, okay, that's another reason why the bar is at a different level. But I just wanted to say this out loud because there is that particular aspect of it. Okay. Yeah. What is a good it's safety critical product. What does that mean? Well, the FDA asks for safe and effective. Effective refers to this term called essential performance. Basically, it's the performance necessary to achieve freedom from unacceptable risk. They don't say zero risk, they say unacceptable risk. That's an important point, because there are medical devices which do have risks. The whole point is if you have a patient in sad shape, maybe this device with a small risk is better than doing nothing at all, and that's what essential performance refers to. And safe, again, minimal unintended harm. And so the point is, okay, a high quality device would be safe, it would be effective. So how do we recognize a high quality device? Now, okay, I do have enough time for this. Okay, those of you out here, what's high quality?
Bruce, works is different.
Oh,
Okay, Bruce is defined close.
Food.
What's high quality?
Meets the needs of the customer.
That sounded a lot alike to
Performance as
me.
designed.
Okay. When I ask a lot of consumers and also hardware engineers that question, I get a simplistic answer like you see here. It does, and they also state high reliability. They ask that it lasts a while. If you go to some software engineers and some venture capitalists and you ask them the same question, you get a bit of a different answer on some occasions. Instead of doing a lot of questions, I'll sit through this anyhow. They ask for something that has a lot of user experience research, which leads to a good UI. That to them is a high quality device or a product. What about the FDA? What if you ask the FDA, what does high quality mean? Their answer is, a device has high quality if it was designed in compliance with a good process.
Like a nuclear bomb?
Hmm?
Like a nuclear warhead. That would be high quality, right?
What counts is the process you use to create the nuclear bomb.
Or like some kind of biological attack. If it was well designed according to a clear process.
Clear process. That is the point. The point is a process. And there is a bit of sanity behind this. Like it almost sounds like I have a definition which is recursive and so it iterates to itself. But what's going on is most quality processes, what they do is they incorporate a feedback. So I want you to imagine that be it hardware or be it software, you are doing some form of continuous improvement. And you are getting feedback from your customers. And the point is they want you to have a process that gets that customer feedback and actually correspondingly changes the process, changes the product. And when an FDA inspector comes visit your company, one of the very first things which they do is they ask to look at the customer complaints, and they'll trace through and they'll see, did you follow your processes? How have you changed your product, or how have you changed your processes to prevent the same mistake occurring inside the future? So it's all process oriented. That's my point. That's the history of what quality, safety, and effectively in the safety critical world is. It all relates to process. And yet, just a couple years ago, the FDA admitted aloud something the rest of us knew all along, which is that process is not everything. The FDA has recorded instances where there are some companies that are fully compliant, but still their product has complaints. Meanwhile, they've audited other places that are not as compliant, yet the product is pretty good and there are no complaints. So there is a loose correlation. Like, I'm not saying process is useless. I'm saying process is a part, but it is not everything. I'm saying that either this slide or a different slide, but I'll talk about it now. FDA admits that in many companies, what often occurs, partly as a consequence of all these audits, is you have people striving for compliance, not quality, compliance. I filled in all the tick boxes, I filled in all the forms. Well, it's one thing to keep your nose to the tick boxes and tick them all off. It doesn't mean your product is high quality, and the goal really is quality. But anyhow, I just thought I'd point that out. So I need to make some more editorial points about processes, and quality processes. A process can be both good and bad. I've just mentioned that being over-anal about following the process, being ultra-compliant, that's no guarantee. On the other hand, a lot of formalized processes. Those of you who know a lot of project management and the whole PMO system and whatnot know in many cases it's defining processes within an engineering team and how engineering talks to other teams. So a form of formalized communications. People do this because having everyone agree to the same playbook does have some advantages. So I'm trying to say it's both good and bad. Okay, how many design control processes? This is a funny story in a certain way. First, my experience with the word called bureaucracy. People love to hate bureaucracy. Always love to hate it. They love to hate excessive processes and whatnot. There's a famous story of this wind storm which hit San Francisco 2 decades ago and toppled a whole bunch of trees in Golden Gate Park. And the city was so sad because now they'd have to cut apart all these dead trees and whatnot. And there was a guy up north in the Mendocino area. He ran his own small family logging firm, and he was going to step right up. He's going to be a volunteer. He's going to drive down with his truck and his wood chipping material, and he's going to volunteer his services to San Francisco and help out the city by the bay. So San Francisco said, thank you, and then they sent him a contract book. It was the size of a telephone book in the old days. And it was this thick. It had page after page of all these rules. It had to check whether he was an investor in South Africa. I was going back a couple of decades. But it had all these amazing rules. And so what he did is he went in front of the TV cameras and he basically said, I tried to help out San Francisco and they gave me a contract book as thick as this telephone book. And he turned on his wood chipper and tossed the thing inside the wood chipper. And the point is, why did San Francisco have this contract book as thick as a phone book? Why? It's because what quality processes are supposed to do is they're supposed to prevent you from making the same mistake you did in the past. Some shit happened in the past. Someone said, let's change the rules so we're not going to make this mistake again. And the older an organization is, be it a city, be it a company, be it whatever, a state government, the more shit has happened, the more rules have been learned, the more rules are then added. And I'm saying that's what happens to medical device firms as well. The more audits you undergo, every single audit, even like the FDA often does, is they'll say, well, okay, we didn't find any severe findings, but you have to improve here, 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 and here, and in 2 months, please send us your plan for how you're going to improve. And what it typically involves is people say, okay, we're going to add a new process here, we're going to add a new process there, and so on. So, 2 years, 4 years, 20 years, Varian's been at this game 30 years. 30 years of audits every few years. What do you expect happened? Well, design control, we have a lot of processes. Now, I was recently part of a Varian team doing due diligence of a medical device startup. Varian was thinking of buying them or maybe not. And as part of the due diligence process, we said, okay, show us your design control processes. And their head of the regulatory group shows us 4 process documents. I looked at these 4 and I'm thinking, I'm jealous. Because Varian, with all those audits over 30 years, and just in design control alone, we have 72 process documents. So this startup, although they did have their ISO 13485, just had received it a year ago, and you can do that as a startup. 4 process documents are sufficient. But you go through 30 years of existence and all the audits, you are going to get processes, and you're going to have a lot of them. Okay, some of you might be aware that the traditional FDA rules are very, very much like a waterfall design process. Waterfall has some merits in some kinds of engineering. Specifically, big capital hardware is probably where it's most effective. If you're going to build a nuclear sub, you probably don't want to do too many design changes. But it's also fraught with other errors. About 2 decades ago, people talked about spiral design. That has evolved to agile. Now, the FDA does allow a form of a sort of subset of agile processes. And Aaron can probably talk more about that. What most medical device firms do is they do iterative loops within different phases of the waterfall, and they do some kind of process there. Okay, I spoke about quality versus compliance in the past. The point being is that if you're compliant, doesn't mean you're going to have good quality and so on. And I mentioned the weaknesses in the process-only approach. I mentioned already ISO 13485 audits, where they're kind of your friends because you're paying them and they want you to succeed versus FDA. Now, the last thing, the FDA's open kimono. Aaron, you might know the new word for it. I kind of forgot the term was.
It's the first time I've heard that.
Well, it's my term.
It's scary, but.
But what the FDA is saying, hey, we realize this oppositional audit approach, it doesn't always encourage openness and honesty, and there ought to be a way for us to work cooperatively. Starting in 2017, the FDA began an experiment. It's my understanding that it completed about 9 months ago, and now they're trying to open it up and make it into a real system where right from the beginning you work cooperatively with the FDA and you openly show them every single nit that you're aware of, and they give you advice on how to deal with it and so on. That is the intent. Here at Varian, we have a number of employees who've worked at other medical device firms and have had their fingers burned in the past. They're kind of reluctant to do the open kimono. I've spoken to people who are at startups. Startups, because they're a startup, they don't have any bad history, and they can start from, since they have no background, they don't have anything to be afraid of. So that's where I might go. I can get you the official name of this process. Open kimono is my term, where you just show them your insides, but other people have a different frame. Turnover and trained staff. Okay, FDA has a bunch of rules, a bunch of processes. You have to even give evidence that you've trained your staff. You have to have records that your staff have been trained upon your processes, how to do all this. And then your staff turns over. Now, it is true that the staff that's just turned over, there are supposed to be computer systems to make sure that your new staff read all the right things, but they weren't in the original instructor-led classes. They're now reading a process document. And as the years go by with staff turnover and without new face-to-face training seminars, you start to have institutional amnesia. One of the people that I know he is a consultant, and he goes to the big name medical device firms, the Boston Scientifics and the Strykers and the Medtronics, and he's called into these various divisions because they used to be compliant and they just got a very bad result for a new audit. Why? Oh, because the new staff don't know the rules that everyone else has followed for all those years. And so this is a real issue with processes. One other thing, this last bullet here, a lot of processes deal with functions, design function, manufacturing function, service function, and so on. The official rules don't talk about engineering functions. FDA doesn't distinguish between electrical engineering, mechanical engineering, and so on. But many people who write internal documents, they will write roles and responsibilities for, I'm going to call it clear deliverables. Those of you who have put together Gantt charts for engineering deliverables in the past, I'm sure you list down every person you need to make every specific thing, this circuit board, that code, and so on. But I've seen it time and time again, people forget to include line items inside their Gantt chart for the system level glue people. They're often forgotten. And they're also forgotten from a regulatory point, and those are often the ones who help pull it all together. Okay, so I've given you the context, I've talked a bit about processes. So this is I've gone over what the problem space is, and I've described what the scenarios is. So let's move over to the solution space. What do you get into as a leader, as an engineering lead? How do you encourage passion in your team when you have this regulated environment? Everything I just said in the last 5 or 10 minutes about what can be depressing aspects of the regulated environment. But one thing that engineering leaders can and should do is they should follow the basics. The first bullet you see here, good project management practices. When a person looks closely at CFR 820.30, these FDA QSRs, what in essence many of them are asking for, at least there's a 75% overlap with what the PMO says you should do. If you're going to run some good project management, you want teams talking to each other. You want a vision statement for what you're trying to do. You want various other things straight out of the good practices. So in that way, there's a nice overlap there. This other bullet you see, eliminate toxic people. I'm going to say that's a basic. I'm pointing it out. First, a step backwards. Those of you in the audience who have spouses, as I think some of you do, or most of you do, you might have heard an old story from relationship management that says, when one spouse says something negative to another spouse, it takes 5 positive things to overcome that one negative thing. This is known in marital relationships. What's also known is the same ratio applies from boss to employee. Boss says a negative thing to an employee. Boss then has to say 5 positive things to get that thing back up again. This is kind of the rule of thumb. The same 5 to 1 ratio applies. And now I'm going to say that even peer-to-peer, when you have a toxic person in your team, the effect of that toxicity overwhelms what you'd otherwise think. I don't know if it's a 5 to 1 ratio, no one has ever given me a number behind it, but the point is, if you're a leader, you're managing a team, one person is a consistent asshole. Most of us like to do positive things and lead the team in great ways and show them a great vision and get them going. But sometimes just getting rid of that toxic person is more effective than all the rest of the positive stuff. So I just want to throw that out. Please don't forget that. Okay, so all this is the basics for general management. It doesn't apply to safety critical. Safety critical has some special needs. Okay, this first bullet, what you see is extensive input, and I'm throwing this in customer research. Some of you might know a lot of engineers love to jump into design right away because it's fun. But extensive customer research is like I'm putting this out because the various rules, IEC 62304, so the regulations, the rules, whatever else say you have to do usability research, fine. You could do it in a cursory fashion. I'm saying no, do it in an extensive fashion. Those of you who were here 1 month ago and listened to Ross Singleton give his talk on his medical device, same story from him. Do extensive customer research. And I'm saying do that not only because it's required for the regulations, not only because it's good for your business, but also because it helps drive passion amongst the people. This is something where regulations don't get in the way. Just hang on here, this is giving me a 5-minute warning here. Okay, thanks, Brian. And sending at times engineers out to meet the actual customers, it helps pump them up. It's a good team thing to do, it's a good strategy, it's good all across the board. You can't lose by doing this, but I'm saying it's even more important in safety critical environments. Okay, I spent 2 slides all about processes. Companies have impossible processes too. And it's not uncommon that you might think that your department within engineering has fine processes, but gosh darn it, the purchasing department has some bad processes, or manufacturing, or whatever else. And I'm claiming that if you want to keep your team passion up, if they see you helping to remove barriers to their execution, even if you have to negotiate with some other departments, not only will it help their passion, it will help the whole thing run a bit better. Now, just a comment. Why do companies have impossible processes? Well, there's a straightforward reason for that, especially in the world of audits. In many occasions, you have, like I told you, FDA comes every few years. Almost in every case, you have to add new processes. And the truth is that when people add new processes, you're usually under time pressure, you have to get on with your real job, you're just going to do a patch. Most people do patches. Those of you who know code bases know what happens to code after years of patches, or hardware after years of patches. Same thing happens to processes after years of patches. You end up with something that's unworkable and unwieldy. Now, in the world of hardware, in the world of software, we have system engineers to help refactor the code and refactor the hardware and things joined together. Very, very few companies have process system engineers. I don't know if there are any jobs for that in the Bay Area. I don't know if I hunted for that title, I don't think I'd find it. But I would argue that that is what a lot of consultants make money on when they promise to clear up your processes. And so as they're applying principles of system engineering to the world of processes instead of the world of code or hardware. But this is real, it can be a barrier, and it can demotivate teams. It saps the passion. Okay, reward system level thinking, and my bullet in blue refers to having managed a variety of teams in the past. I've had electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, firmware engineers, all sorts of engineers reporting to me for quite a while. And I used to ask them a question. Okay, how would you like to improve your career? How would you want to educate? How do you want to improve yourself? Easily, 2/3 or 3/4 of them reply, I want to become better in my niche. Many double E's want to be a better double E. Many Mechis want to be a better Mechi, and so on. Very, very few say, well, my core strength is double E, but I like to learn a little bit of mechanical, a little bit of firmware. Very few want to go in a lateral fashion. Very few want to add system engineering. And I would state that a lot of companies should want that. I know Varian wants it and many others do. From a career perspective, I understand their point of view in that many of them kind of feel, oh shit, if I'm laid off, if bad stuff occurs and I'm out hunting for a job, it's easier for me to market myself as an electrical engineer or a mechie or whatever else. That's why being better in your niche might give you more job protection in case shit happens. My counter to that point is simply, if you demonstrate to future employees that you can and do think in a lateral fashion, Varian isn't the only company with this system. There are plenty of other companies that merge hardware with software, with mech, with electrical firmware, and all the rest. And anyone who demonstrates that they can think of it across would help them out. But, so you as a manager, as a leader, you have people reporting to you, reward system level thinking. Okay, this next one is very specific to medical devices, and I'm just going to point out the machines which we build that deliver beams of radiation to treat cancer. It's over 18,000 components on it. There are duplicates, so it's actually over 9,000 unique components. According to the rules and regulations, if we do not give them any special attributes, then we must treat them all as if changing any one of them could have a critical impact upon our medical device. Now, the real truth is, out of these 9,000 components, in many cases, if I have a mounting screw here and I want to move my mounting screw there, it's not going to make a whit of difference to the safety of the overall machine. But unless I have declared that in advance, then what I'm doing is I'm setting up an enormous amount of paperwork for even minor ECNs or ECOs. And so, as an engineering manager, what you might have to do is you might have to cooperate with your manufacturing department, your purchasing department, your accounting department. You might have to set up the enterprise software such that components have attributes on their risk level. And once all these departments have cooperated together, and now you've added this new parameter, what the risk is, this allows you to proactively say, oh, these things here are low risk, and oh, those things over there are high risk, and you're going to treat them differently, and this helps you out in audits, it helps you out in ECOs, it helps you across the board, but you kind of have to deal with this in advance, and you have to know to think about this, and it requires time to set that up. Fixed purchasing reduces unnecessary design control. Maintain risk analysis. So again, this is from the FDA. You have to have risk analysis documents in a startup, but also in many established companies. It's just so easy for a design team to look at their particular iteration and do a risk analysis on the changes that they're going to make to this iteration. It takes a certain level of maturity to sit there and proactively think and say, hey, I'm going to create a product-wide risk analysis that's going to be multi-generational. And I use the word unrewarded there because so often in many corporations you are responsible for getting a certain deliverable out on a certain date. And thinking ahead to future deliverables, that doesn't reward you. But I'm saying that it should. And that as an engineering leader within any org, you should take it upon yourself to have the rest of the company recognize when someone does some forward thinking. And it also mitigates the effect of staff turnover. Back to Boeing 737 MAX. Although I do not know the details of aerospace design, I'm betting they have some form of risk analysis. I'm betting that in a multi-generational company, you've had staff turnover. You have people who've known about shit that happened in the past and they've left the company, but have they kept a multi-generational risk analysis? Hopefully they have, but how well was it? Does your new staff know how to read these various lines? And it could be that part of the problems with the 737 MAX were due to things that others would have known about if they'd only been on site or whatever else, or it was buried inside a table. And if you pay attention to that risk analysis and make it multi-generational, it'll help you out, and it'll help the team out, and it'll prevent mistakes. Okay, in a summary, we want team passion to make products that will delight the customer. And the techniques a lot of non-regulated firms use to increase employee sense of freedom, to increase their passion, it's hard to implement them in a safety-critical regulated environment. And so you have to be aware that the classic way of addressing safety-critical design is to add process, and there's dangers to that. So an engineering leader has to work with process, has to adapt to these processes, and that involves following the basics of PMO, removing bad employees, removing bad processes, tune your bill of materials, tune your software modules, describe in advance what's possibly safety related, what's not. That'll ease your level of design control and reward multi-generational design. That's it.
Do you have time for questions?
Time for questions. I admit I could have asked for questions along the way, but I didn't know what my time was going to be. So
It's 8:11, 8:12.
I'm just going to grab another microphone here.
Reza's gonna run the microphone.
Okay. It's on. It's on.
Yeah, sure.
I'd like to hear more about the bad, removing the bad, because I'm a physicist by education, but none of the problems that I see in my clients all over the world are technology. It's all about having disengaged employees or ineffective managers or lack of leadership, or team is not really a team, it's just a group. Can you say a little bit more specifically about what you see the critical contributors to the so-called bad and what you do to address it?
All right, so I already went over the dangers of toxic employees, and I also mentioned their toxic processes. You've correctly indicated that the lack of leadership, problems within the upper ranks, problems in corporate culture, those are also bad. We're also faced with, I kind of bias this towards what can an engineering leader do? And you saw me wiggle my way out of one of the things by saying negotiate with other departments, because there are things beyond your control. And so I'm saying that barriers to execution, be they administrative, or be they people, or be they from the leadership or lack of leadership, these really do demoralize the team, and you need to keep that up. I do want to address this issue of compliance, being compliant instead of being quality. I'm saying that's well documented within regulated environments, but it's not unique to regulated environments. There was this article a few years ago about a problem that the BBC had out in the UK. They had done this documentary, and it had gone bad because there were some mistakes made in it, and there were some lawsuits, so they created their own internal processes. Now, we're not talking a regulated environment, at least not regulated the same way medical devices are, but the BBC made their own checklists. And then what happened is their culture evolved so that people just stared only at the checklists and no one, like, a checklist is useful, but you use it in addition to the rest of your thinking. Don't turn off the rest of your thinking. Ideally, you do your rest of your thinking first and just use the checklist to see what you forgot. But that's not what happened to BBC. They just only followed the checklist, and every little department had their own little section, and a bunch of people with tunnel vision looked only at their section, ticked off only their boxes, no one took the wide view, and they put out another documentary which had a bunch of errors, and it's the same thing. Can you pass the microphone? I ran a little bit from here.
Hi. One of the things I've seen in some industries is the concept of a maturity model. And I'm wondering in this regulated environment whether that concept exists or is ever used. The idea that, all right, you're starting off, you're doing something simple, but we expect that as you become more evolved, that you're going to have better practices, be able to demonstrate in more detail, be more mature. Is that concept existing in here?
Yeah. I'm not a regulatory expert. Aaron, if anyone is. Aaron, you want to talk to that? Because it's not the sea of the mind.
Yeah, so I'll just say, so I've worked with dozens of medical device companies, and this has only come up once. And it's interesting because, in a sense, because we're in a heavily regulated industry, our processes have become binary. You either pass the audit or you don't. And one of the things I struggle to with my clients is that, yes, I know you passed the audit, but your processes are not working well for your engineers or for other parts of the company. But because there's such strong legal pressure to pass audits, it's very hard sort of culturally to get beyond that. But yeah, I think we could benefit from better processes. We often just get just good enough.
I also want to reiterate this business of big firm and small firm and bar at a different level. Even if a company stays small, they're going to find the bar creeping up on them. If for no other reason that when an inspector comes, if they leave saying, I found nothing wrong, well, no one's going to do that. Everyone's going to say, you can improve yourself in this manner. So even if you kept your nose clean and everything perfectly, they're still going to find something for you to improve on. So the stuff always improves.
Yeah, so this is a kind of a middle ground question on that. You mentioned like Boston Scientific and others, which are collections of small companies that have aggregated together. And Varian is a large company, with a big group and a long history. So is there a business model for a large company to essentially spin off or have skunk works or do whatever is necessary to have lean development that allows them to do things against this hypothetically lower bar, quicker, time to market, lower overall cost to bring new initiatives out? Is there any examples of that, or is that a practical approach?
Okay. First, I want to reiterate something that Russ Singleton said last month, which is big company or small, try and do a lot of your prototype work prior to entering design control. So you want to run through enough iterations that you have an idea of what your final product is going to be. You've got your requirements written down. Then you turn the switch on and you enter design control. Now, the bar is going to be set where the bar is going to be set. In fact, Varian, we have a problem here. As I mentioned, we're a big firm, FDA sits the bar behind us. What happens when we do an acquisition? We bought a firm recently in Germany. It was a small startup. They had passed their ISO 13485. And we bought them, and we looked through their stuff. Okay, this also came out as part of the due diligence beforehand, but we knew damn well we would buy them and then, oh shit, the bar is raised because they're now owned by a big firm. And sure enough, we have 10-ish people at Varian working with them on cleaning up their documentation to Varian's standards. Now, what is well written about is, I mentioned the PMA process that I'm not an expert at. PMA involves a lot more documentation. PMA is a United States clearance, and it was well known for a while that United States firms would go outside of the nation to do, I'm going to call it experimental, but hopefully it had some safety rings, and do it in other nations, and ideally get a bunch of scientific papers written about the results there and use that for your PMA inside the US. That's a technique which was done. But your question raises a point. So now is a good time to put this up as whatever. Kimberly introduced me as combination hardware, software, physics, knowing a bit of regulatory, which is true. I've had a new adventure into my life. Those of you who've been on the factory tour know that we make the big, huge machines. You know it's a mix of physics, mech-eng, elec-eng, firmware-eng, and desktop software-eng. And for the last 18 months, I've been working in the cloud doing artificial intelligence. But this is all, neural nets or whatever. This is all called standard radiation therapy. 2 days ago, Varian announced it completed its acquisition of a company in India with 1,700 employees. And this is a hospital chain. And I point that out because in the United States, it's illegal for a medical device firm to own a hospital chain, but it is allowed for a US firm to own a hospital chain in India. So there are 10 hospitals in India. Now, as it happens, they already have our equipment, they bought it beforehand. They're also barely breaking even. So why the heck did Varian buy this hospital chain in India? Well, the answer comes down to big data, artificial intelligence, neural nets, and what it takes to train a neural net. And the laws in India are that medical images are not allowed to leave India, but we are allowed to put in neural net agents into the information within India, and we can train them there. That is allowed. And so I'm now going to be involved in, I'll take a step backward and I'll say, here in the United States, it took 12 months for Varian lawyers to negotiate with lawyers from a hospital chain in Florida to get information from 600 patients. It was 12 months. And most of it was about if shit happens, who can sue who is liable for what, who has indemnity on what and whatnot. That's what the 12 months are. Well, since we own these 10 hospitals in India now, we get access to patients or patient information from 30,000 patients.
Huge data set.
Huge set right away. And not only that, but it also includes a lot of blood work and a lot of high-end blood work. And I point that out. Some of you might or might not know. Some of you have been through high school biology back in high school. You were probably told, oh, there's red blood cells and white blood cells. And those who were advanced were taught white blood cells are T cells, B cells, macrophages, or leukocytes. Then, a few years ago, they said, oh, there's killer T cells, there's regulatory T cells, there's other kinds of T cells. And now we know, oh, some of these cells have the protein CD8 on, or CD4, or CD20. And not only that, but some of them can be active and deactive, and so on. And when you read about these cancer treatments, the CAR-T cancer treatments, they're taking the CD8 cells and they're reactivating them. Well, it turns out that radiation therapy can also affect the immune system. And the way the beams interact and chop apart the proteins, chop apart the DNA, that helps stimulate the DNA system. So now we're also going to have access to all the blood work. And so joining blood work with radiation, with imaging, putting it together, neural nets, random forests, biochemistry, cell cultures, that's what my world is now. I've had to add on yet another scientific discipline. Now naturally, I can't learn cell culture and biochemistry that fast. Instead, we have to partner. So we get back to what does it, Kimberly asked the question, what does it mean to lead a team? Well, we have to make a team of the data scientists and the cell culture people and the biochemists and pull them all together and keep the passion up in this regulated environment. So that's a challenge now.
One of my friends was a VP of engineering at a medical device company, a small kind of startup, and he told the CEO honestly that the schedule proposed was not feasible given the requirements, and he was fired. Any comment?
Yeah, well, it's I'm 100% sure he was proven right. Okay. Right. That's my first comment. And in some fields, people try and skirt as close as they can to the edge of the law. The CEO may have thought that there was more room to skirt a bit closer. If you really are a startup, the FDA might let you get away with a few things. Back to why I turned down that job, but the one recruiter who called me up, I basically sat on the phone. I said, I don't know how to lie to the FDA in that way. You're going to have to hire someone who can lie to the FDA because I don't know how to do that for you. All righty. Any other questions? Oh, okay, another question.
I just had a question about, you said you declare, when you make a design, you declare where the risk is in the product and that's what you need to control to make it a quality product. And how do you do that? Is that like 5% of the components are high risk and the other ones are just, but we don't have to worry about that. But your focus point is really important.
Okay, so just a comment in terms of there's the word risk and the word failure. Usually in medical devices, risk refers to how can a human get harmed, be it the patient, be it the therapist, be it anyone else, even the genetic. And what the FDA looks for and what people should do is a top-down analysis, look at all the ways that a person can get harmed. There is a recommended methodology from ISO 14971, which says you should look for this and look for that and whatever else. In our particular field, in radiation therapy, the two main ways a person can get harmed is when radiation when the wrong amount or wrong shape of radiation is applied, that's step one. A variation of it was the patient correctly positioned? Those two kind of relate because it has to do with where the radiation goes. And the second major way a person can get harmed is collision. We have this big robotic machine, it can move around, it could crush the patient. There are 18 other ways a person could get harmed, and they're all listed in 14971, but those are kind of minor for our particular device. So of the two big ones, we have these high-level approaches that say a person can get harmed this way, they can get harmed that way, and every single harm you want to stop with some mitigation, okay? So now we have a technological mitigation. Ideally, it's technological. Some mitigations are human paying attention. Those are the most dangerous ones, but I'm going to pretend that every single way of being harmed is stopped by some sensor or some technology somewhere. Okay, that's the top-down approach. The bottom-up approach is called a FMEA, Failure Modes Effect Analysis. So now, each of these technological mitigations that you put in, look at how it could fail. Now, I mentioned we have 19,000 components upon our machine, or 9,000 unique ones. And all of our mitigations, we have like 20 or 30 mitigations, and you look at the components in these 20 or 30 mitigations, and you find out of these 20 or 30 systems, it's roughly 800 components. That these 800 we're going to declare to be critical to safety. The other 8,200 are not as critical. So we are telling in advance to our purchasing department, our manufacturing department, and service department, when you buy these things, when you replace these, when you change these, when anyone sniffs around with any of these 800, you better be damn careful. You need engineering sign off and whatnot. But the other 8,200, we can use our less diligent processes for those. It doesn't matter if we move some cable from A to B and whatever else in certain other spots, that's not a complete issue. So it's this risk analysis approach, that's what helps you identify these critical to safety components, and that's what reduces the documentation burden for all the other ones.
Okay, well, let's.
We're at the halfway point
No,
here.
sorry, it's too late, it's 8:30, okay.
Give what he's right.
Okay, all right.
Thank you, let's thank John for sharing with us. And I hope that you will hang around and talk with each other and come back next month. Oh, does anybody know what's on next month?